There is such an invisible and mysterious line between these two islands of Indonesia that no fish, bird or animal can cross. This line starts between Bali and Lombok Islands and goes to the end of Mal Islands. Although this line is not visible in any radar or sonar, the animals, birds, and fish on the western side of this line are totally different from the animals on the eastern side. Although there is only a distance of 35 kilometers between these two islands, but if you go from Bali to Lombok, then the whole environment changes. The birds and animals on Bali do not cross this line and go to Lombok, and the animals and birds of Lombok do not come here. And not only this, but the fish in the sea below also do not cross this line. So these are two totally different worlds, like two islands which are divided by some mysterious power. And there is such an invisible line between these islands that no one can cross except humans. This line is called Wallace Line, and it was discovered by a British explorer named Alfred Russel Wallace about 150 years ago. Those of you who have studied biology in school must know Russel Wallace because of the concept of natural selection. Now Alfred Russel also has a very interesting story. He was born in a poor house in England in 1823. Wallace's father was a cartographer, which means he used to make maps, and that's why he used to travel to different places. Wallace was very fond of reading and writing, but because of poverty, he had to leave his education at a very young age and come into the business of his father. And this decision of his life was going to make him famous all over the world one day. After traveling to different places with his father, Wallace had a lot of interest in geography and wildlife. Wherever he went, he brought some trees, plants, and insects with him. In 1854, Wallace set out on a journey to these Malay islands with a few of his companions. He first came here to Singapore, then he went to Indonesia from here and roamed well. And then finally he came to Bali Island. Wallace liked Bali and its wildlife very much. He began to examine the animals and plants there in detail. He saw a lot of tigers, rhinos, elephants, and a lot of birds like woodpeckers and parrots, etc. Whatever he was seeing, he kept noting it in his diary. Then he took his board and went to the Lombok Islands 35 kilometers away. But when he got here, he was completely surprised. There were totally different animals and birds here. There were Komodo dragons, kangaroos, koalas, and many such animals and birds that were not in Singapore, Indonesia or Bali. Wallace and his companions were very surprised that why is this? Meanwhile, Wallace had malaria and he had to stay in a room on this island. But in this disease, he got time to think about this invisible line. And then a great thing clicked in his mind, that there are all those animals on the Bali Islands that are found in Asia like tigers, elephants, etc. While on the Lombok Islands, there are all such animals and birds that are found in Australia like kangaroos, koalas, and monitor lizards. Wallace then proposed this theory here at many millions of years ago Asia and Australia would be connected to each other. But as time went by, as the snow melted and the water of the seas increased, Australia and Asia kept moving away from each other. And as a result, the sea came in the middle and such islands were formed. The animals on the western side stayed in Bali and the rest in Asia, and the eastern side stayed here in Lombok and Australia. Now, because there was a sea in the middle, it was impossible to swim across the sea for animals like tigers, elephants, or kangaroos and go to the other side. So one mystery was solved. Now the second mystery was that why do birds not cross this line? Why do no birds come from Lombok to Bali and from Bali to Lombok? When Wallace pondered over the birds found on Bali and Lombok Islands, he found the answer to this question. Basically, there are non-migratory birds on these two islands. Actually, there are two types of birds. One is migratory birds, which travel thousands of kilometers like Arctic terns, which travel a distance of about 90,000 kilometers every year and go from the South Pole to the North Pole. Similarly, there are Siberian cranes which travel 5,000 to 10,000 kilometers from Russia in winter and come to China, India, and Pakistan. These birds have very special wings because of which they can fly above the sea for a long time. They spread their wings like an airplane and then stay like this for 1,000 to 10,000 kilometers. But here in Eastern Asia and especially in Indonesia, the birds are non-migratory. That means the place where they are born, they just fly in the range of 1 to 2 kilometers. That's why it is impossible for these birds to cross this 35-kilometer sea. So the animals and birds understood why they don't cross this line. Now the rest are fish or other marine animals. Why it is difficult to cross this line for fish, even Wallace did not understand because the concept of plate tectonics was not discovered at that time. In today's modern times, we all know that our planet is not static but dynamic. There are a lot of movements in this smooth-looking Earth. There are a lot of plates that collide with each other, which causes a lot of changes on our planet. Like today, we know that about 335 million years ago all our continents were together and there was only one continent in our Earth called Pangaea. Then due to the movement of tectonic plates, in the next billions of years, this whole continent broke and was divided into different continents. Like 45 million years ago, today what we call the Indian subcontinent was part of Australia, and due to tectonic plates, it broke from here and went up to the Eurasian plate. As a result of this collision, the land of both the plates rose up and folded and the world's largest mountain range was created, which we call the Himalayas today. The joining points of these plates are very volatile and most earthquakes originate from here. That's why most of the earthquakes in South Asia originate in the Himalayas Hindu Kush range. Similarly, this whole area of Malaysia, Singapore and Indonesia was also a victim of a very large tectonic shift, due to which there are many volcanic eruptions here. And that's why the water current between these islands, which is part of the sea, is so fast that it is very difficult for any fish to cross it. That's why even after being only 35 kilometers away, these Komodo dragons can't swim to the Bali Islands, and neither can any fish come from there to this island. So these tectonic plate shifts are the biggest reason for this invisible line. Although this theory came after Wallace's death many years ago, but if you look at it, its conclusion taken 150 years ago was absolutely correct. There are many more such interesting and mysterious places in our world that we will explore in the coming videos. If you like our videos, then subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video with another interesting topic. Take care of yourself.